All right, so this next section is Act 3. We're going to be talking about art and you now. This is working forward. Now we've talked about you and all the elements that are involved with you personally in the art process. And then we've talked about art, the magnitude, how big it is, and where you're at with it and being okay with all that. And now we're going to talk about working forward with it. So we have those two things and we're going to marry them together. I want to start off with my favorite and first point, and it's called working for future you, right? And it is exactly what it means. It's kind of rehashing on what I've been talking about, where you're in your head all the time. You're thinking about now. You draw the thing and you're like, oh man, it's not good now, and you get all down on yourself because I want it to be better now. I want this now, right? But I have to rehash that it doesn't really matter now. You're not drawing for now. You shouldn't be. Again, unless you're a professional and you have to perform and, give out that deadline and, do your thing. But if you're just drawing, then even if it's commission work, I would say smaller commission work stuff, which I would consider any furry work or anything like that is smaller just because you're always growing anyway. So it's just steps, right? Everything in the artistic journey is a step forward. It's for later. It's for future you. You don't want to draw with the intention of what am I going to draw today? For today. You want to draw today, but you want to know that that's going to help you tomorrow and the day after and 10 years from now, right? That's where the cool shit is 10 years from now. And everything you do now is going to help future you, right? So you're just a pawn right now, but future you is going to be OP, right? So you gotta get those gains in for future you. That's always it's such a important concept to me. I think I've always done this ever since I was a kid. I was or not a kid, whatever, when I first started art. And even now I'm still doing this where it's I'm just doing the things I'm doing now and it really doesn't matter too much as long as I'm doing it, and then future me is going to be better. So if you haven't considered this before, definitely really think about it. This also has to do with, that whole zooming out thing, that perspective stuff. Take one for the you in the future, and then, that's good. It's just a good perspective to have. This kind of goes into my next point, which is being a student for life. This one's huge, though, because art is so huge, and this is one of my other favorite things about art, because you're going to draw so much shit, You're going to be cool, I drew a dog. All right, and then you're well, what's the dog really look like? And then you look at a dog, and you're huh, dogs have a dew claw. Why? What's that for? And then you're going to learn stuff. You're going to realize things, and you're going to research it. Then you're oh, cool, what about a cat, though? And you're oh, shit, cats are shaped differently. What's the function of a cat over a dog? Huh. And you're oh, what's the fucking rhinoceros? Look at their hide. What's that for? Why is it so thick? What are they protecting against? What the hell? And then you can look at their habitat. Why they need to do this? The coolest thing about everything that exists in nature is it's been made that way to adapt to whatever, right? As far as animals go, this can get a little weird depending on what you believe in. But as far as character design and creature design goes, I always recommend Terryl Whitlatch. She's an amazing creature designer. And her methods of doing so is she started as a biologist and she went to school for that. And when she graduated, she was always drawing, but when she graduated, she did some paleo art. So doing the stuff where she recreated what a dinosaur would look like, but because she knew of the living conditions that an animal will grow up in and adapt to, and then now she understands, oh, why is the skin like this? Why are they shaped like this? Why do they have these muscles? Why do they have these bone structures? What do they hunt? How do they hunt? Do they hunt? And how do their surroundings change this or help it, or how was it a problem before? So with this knowledge, she was able to create dinosaurs, from nothing, right? Well, from bones. And then from that, she's done a ton of Star Wars creature designs, a bunch of stuff, and they're phenomenal. And so, I guess her background's a little different because she was actually from a scientific thing, but very, very same with any other artist, I've done a ton of biology research because I've drawn so many animals, but even to other stuff like architecture, historical, sites or anything like that, why do the mountains get bluer the further away? They call it atmospheric perspective, but it turns out it's because of the fucking, what's it called? The molecules in the air the water molecules and everything going far away, they get more densely compact as they go far away. So we get this like blue tint on everything, and if that's wrong on some extent, like, don't quote me. I'm sure, it's like, it's generally there. I'm sure word for word, I'm probably wrong somewhere, and I guess I should probably touch on that. You're never, when you're an artist and you're studying this like surface level knowledge stuff, you're not going to be a master in the topic at all. Don't ever like claim to be, but you'll probably know more than the average Joe about a lot of stuff just because you had to research it to draw it, You think about like, oh, how does a robot move? I don't know, but I have to draw it for a commission. Well, let me look at it. Oh, look at these joints. Look at oh man, it's a whole fucking, like not a pivot system. What's that, like a tube going into another tube, a piston. There we go. Cool. What's a piston, right? I drew a car engine, like, well, let's give this a shot, And like, I don't know anything about an engine or what anything was, but when you're drawing it, you kind of like learn it. You're like, oh, okay, so that's the engine. Cool. Oh, that's where the oil goes. Gotcha. This is the tank of the coolant. This is where your fucking windshield wiper fluid stuff goes. And you're making these connections while you're drawing it because you don't know. And you're like, well, I'm trying to draw it. I need to learn it. And I need to figure out what it is. And if you're looking at like a proper like anatomy or breakdown reference thing, then there it is. So you're going to learn it. And by drawing stuff, I think you're actually like creating a stronger bond than just like looking at something, right? You look at something, you're like, that's an engine. But if you spend 30 minutes drawing an engine, you're like, that's a fucking engine. Like, I know kind of what it looks like now. I know where it is, where it sits at the very least, I know the general proportions of an engine compared to where it sits in the hood, So that just goes for everything too. You're like, what's a house design look like? Well, a fucking square with the roof on it, right? No, there's tons more that goes involved with the house. And like, there's foundations, how that works. There's trim, you draw a room a ton of times and you're like, yeah, it's like a square, right? Well, no, there's trim. There's, some ceilings have like speckly shit, It's all these little observations that you take for granted as a human because you're like, well, there it is. I see it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But as an artist, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, this makes sense, right? And it just goes for everything because from anything you see to how physics generally works. Oh my God, let me tell you about fucking like particle animation. And I don't mean the 3D stuff. I mean the like, actual particles and elements that are happening when in something like a wave, like when the ocean's like flowing, right? Or when fire is burning and going up, why does fire move so sporadically? And you're like, what the fuck? What's happening? Awesome book called Elemental Magic. It's what's it by? It's by Joseph Gilland. He was like the lead animator, I think, or lead effects animator, sorry, on Lilo and Stitch and probably some other stuff. But he went to go study some ocean waves. This is getting really anecdotal. I'm sorry, I don't know, but it's really fucking cool. So I'm just going to talk about it anyways. And he went to Hawaii. A few of his team did, a lot of them. And then his job was to study the ocean for 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks, right? And dude, the information in here is insane. It's like very scientific. It actually talks about like the fucking kinetic and potential energy in a wave, why it's happening, how things are going, where the movement is, and the drawings are phenomenal. It's fucking great. So super recommend that. Anyway, so yeah, I'm talking about all this stuff, and it's like, it's crazy because you're absorbing this knowledge while you're drawing it and while you're studying it. So you're literally a student of life, like of everything there is to know about life, or at least a lot of it, at least. And then, the more you know it, now you can put it together. Now you can alternate it. Now you could figure out why something's happening, and be like, okay, would this make sense here? Does it? Does it not? Will it work visually anyways? I don't know. And then you can fuck with it, right? So again, like learning, I think is super important the joy of learning is a super important thing, good quality to have. I would say as an artist, but honestly, I just think as a person, I know some people might have like kind of shaky backgrounds when it comes to like something like school, blah, blah, blah. School's dumb, doesn't count. I mean, I'm not discrediting school. I fucking loved my art school, whatever. But I just want to like definitely emphasize that the school learning environment is not the same as learning on your own and like taking things into your own hands, specifically when you have passion for it, right? Going to school for something you have passion for versus going to school are separate, totally separate things, worlds apart, right? And on the same note, you know, you going out on the internet and finding your own like material to learn from is totally different. Way more satisfying. You know, we've all done it. We've found a tutorial that we liked, I guess, and we found some concepts that really ring true with us. We're like, oh shit, we read a book that's like, damn, this is good. You know, good information. That's the learning. That's fun. That's great. That's what sticks to you too. And a lot of this is because you run into the problem first, and you're like, I care about this. And I want to figure it out, right? Like, this is why all those people were doing the studying stuff in Lilo's Stitch. It's on an island. They needed waves. So they're like, oh, okay, I'll animate a wave. And I bet the animators were like, let me try. Ooh, like this. I mean, it's a wave. It looks like water, but we're not there yet, you know? I'm sure they did a test or two before they even went to study it. And then they went to study it. And then they came back and they're like, yo, fucking let me tell you about the water. God damn, you know? And they fucking made it awesome. And it's great. So yeah, Student4Lyfe, man. Realize the joy of learning is strong. It's powerful. I think like as a human, you just want to keep learning stuff and improving and growing. That's why I think games are so cool, because we're like, how do you do it? And then you learn it and then you get good at it. And that all feels good. Right, and game or art is like a game in my opinion. You just a lot of life mechanics too, or just the similar base foundations where it's like, I don't know how to do this, and it's scary and it's hard and it's frustrating, but now I do know how to do this, and now it's not so bad. Maybe it's even fun, right? Just kind of keep that stuff in mind. I think it's a good kind of way to approach some of this stuff.